Thanks again, Navarino, for the sponsored coffee break. This session, we'll be discussing more about vessel automation, decarbonization, and green technology. So I will like to bring to the rostrum Mr. Andreas Chrysostomou, our Chief Strategy Officer at Tototheo Maritime. Mr. Chrysostomou is a seasoned professional in the shipping industry, and he holds many masters in business administration. Goodness me, I don't think I can read all these. I think he doesn't need any further introduction. So, Andreas, if you may come up, thank you.
Surprise, surprise, me again. Oh my God. We are back. Hello. I've been asked by the organizers to address the issue of vessel automation. And I do know that every time we start discussing vessel automation, you run away wildly fantasy and you watch these huge monsters called super ships that they go everywhere, they just cross the oceans, and there's nobody on board. Those are actually not vessel automation. That's unmanned ships, and it's the goal. Most probably that's what the visionaries are actually looking to happen in the years to come. And those years to come are not yesterday or 2 years from now. The imagination runs wild because people do think of the end goal in accordance to what the technology can do today. And the truth is that technology today might be able to take us somewhere. But before we understand what that thing is, we have to understand what is autonomy. And it's a little bit chicken and the egg situation, but autonomy addresses states. It's the autonomy of a region in a certain country. So autonomy does not really help us here. What we're looking for is automation. And automation is a process where we have is technology directed, and it also addresses a mechanical system where processes run without human intervention. On board your ships today, you have many automated parts. You don't have a single human on board the vessel do A, B, C, and D. They have specific tasks, but automation does exist. And then fantasy talks about autonomous, and there we have a different one. The autonomous is an adjective, and if you have been following the discussions at the IMO, we can find out that about autonomous shipping, you will know that there is a big difference between autonomous ships and unmanned ships. So when I talk about autonomous ships here, I'm not referring to unmanned ships. We have in IMO 4 levels of autonomous ships. We have the level 1, which is a ship with automated processes and decision support is referred to as level 1. Level 2, autonomous operations, is described as a remote control ship with seafarers on board. That sounds to me like another transport mode that you're using lately. At level 3, the ship is remotely controlled with nobody on board. And at level 4, the ship is completely autonomous. Now, moving forward to automation, moving automation forward, you have to understand this is not something that will happen in one night. It will take time. And for that reason, I have done a parallelism, what will happen in the next 20 years. And why say 28 years? Because that's the year 2050. That's where actually we're supposed to reduce our carbon footprint in accordance to IMO to a certain level. Autonomy in the sense of technology will not happen before we decarbonize the industry. It doesn't make sense. So it will coincide, it will happen after that. So let's say 28 years from now, let's try and see in such a small period of time, because 28 years are not 30 years. It's not even one generation. The year 1994 takes us back to 28 years from today. And let's see what we have in 1994 and what we have today. In 1994, Nokia launched the 2010 mobile phone. Jeff Bezos was registered Relentless, which now is Amazon. And the ships that we launched on that time, they most probably went for scrap. But now imagine, the span is this, but the expansion of technology, and especially digitalization-wise, is humongous. When Bezos was launching Relentless, I don't think he ever thought that he would have this huge platform today that most probably is the largest platform in the world that everybody buys. I mean, every time I think of something very strange, I just go to Amazon and I find it to buy it. So what's happening, though? We have all these things, and we're going to have autonomous ships and most probably unmanned ships in the future. What happened to the human? And I come back to something I said this morning. The human in the loop, where it's defined as an operational model which requires human interaction for it to complete it. You understand that our computers make decisions very fast in comparison to the way we do it. So we have an automation system, but we need the humans to complete the function. We have an open loop. In order to close the loop, we have to have the human. Is there any specific reason for that? Most probably, there's a psychological one. I will ask you to raise your hands if I ask you to board a vessel, a passenger ship, a cruise ship, which has no lifeboats. No lifeboats. Will you board that? How many of you will board that ship? I will board the ship because I don't need the lifeboats. There are ships at the moment, they're crossing the channel in the United Kingdom, in the channel up in the North Sea, which they don't have lifeboats. And if you look in the history of naval architecture and the survival of passengers from lifeboats, is minimal. You are, most of you, you're coming from the industry on the electronic side. We used to have on board the ship the Marinetta. The only use that we know, the only use that is being used once and is being recorded, it was used by a member of the crew holding it as a life jacket. So there is, though if I tell you to go on board the ship with lifeboats, you will say no. If I tell you board the plane without a pilot, you will say no. Do we need the pilot on the plane? I doubt it. Because the plane can take off and land precisely, not even remotely, autonomously nowadays without the use of the crew. But in any way, we need to have the human in the loop in many different ways, because they will take into account situational awareness. It was Captain Adami this morning who told us, yes, we have the data, but the data is like a mechanical movement. In the past, I did this, therefore I do that. They might not be able to take into consideration what's going around all the time. So we need the human in this process. We need the human to be present. We need the human to be trained. We need the human to operate on shore when we have the ships going around. But if it did not know how the ship works, how will be able that person to be on the shore center and control the autonomous ship? So in essence, and I think we had a question about that this morning, what do we need to do? How we take this, we deal with this evolution of the autonomous systems. And I'm not talking again autonomous ships, because all of you will think of a ship without crew. What I'm talking about is that a ship that has very autonomous parts, autonomous ways of navigation even, but it will be remotely controlled the one way or the other from shore by able seamen. If they haven't been on board, they cannot be able seamen on shore. So for a long period of time, you will have with you the hybrid vessels that are fully like the airplanes. They have everything they need to go by themselves, but you have the pilots, because then they will go to the control room and control them from the shore. But in essence, for me, and I don't want to keep you very long because we need to catch up time, but even today, you know that the crews we have now and the crews that we used to have in 1994, most probably they spend their time cleaning the engines, cleaning the engine room, scrap paint, and so on and so on. Today, obviously, your crews are totally different. They do different jobs, but the training, it remains the same. It's a convention that it was drafted when I was a junior. STCW of 1995 with some evolution afterwards. So education and knowledge demand are not much. If the companies don't do the internal education, your crews, they know the basic of navigation. So in conclusion, how we deal, in my opinion, we don't stop technology. We have to accept technology will bring us to automation. Automation will bring us to have autonomous ships, which they can be, some cases they will be partly crewed and partly not, and in other cases they'll be completely autonomous. But we need to bring the people, which we want to keep them in the loop, to the standard to be able to cope with that. And the only way to do that is education and provision of tools to find the new technologies. I am 58, and many of my age, they don't even know how to use a smartphone. When you ask them, they say, but when I went to school, we didn't have smartphones. When I went to school, we didn't have Columbia to go to space. It doesn't mean that I should not learn what that means. But in order, you need someone to do that provision. So instead of saying automation, it will never come, which is say automation is here, it will evolve, it will reach a certain level to the future that it will be unthinkable for us to understand what it is as we know today. But in order to achieve that, and in order to be safe, and in order to save the environment and make sure that we're environmentally friendly, we need to keep the human in the loop at all these processes, in my opinion, and we have to provide that person with the tools and the education to be able to do it. Thank you very much.